Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so today I'm going to show you a deck which completely improbably won the Pokémon Trading Card Game World Championships. Now, there is a cliche. It's not just in Pokemon, it's in lots of things, but it is a cliche in the Pokemon Trading Card Game as well. Nobody saw that coming. Well, I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, Audino and Mega Audino, nobody saw this coming. Maybe the odd Japanese person, because we saw a couple Japanese people playing this at Worlds, but at least in the UK, Europe, US, etc., nobody saw this coming. I did a video about what to play for the World Championships. I am proud of this video. Now, I am biased, admittedly, but I think it was a pretty gosh darn good video. I think I took the available information and gave a very good analysis of what decks are good and what should be played. I didn't even mention Audino, not even in passing. Now, good friend of mine, Nick Pierce, he was the lovely chap that went ahead and did some commentary with the Pokemon Company and myself at German and Italian Nationals, and UK without me. And at German Nationals, we were seeing opening some boxes after the tournament, and Nick was opening Audino after Audino after Audino, and lamenting the fact that, oh my god, this is terrible. Now, Nick did just get ninth for the World Championships. Hey, Nick. So, let's give props to the dude. He was wrong. We were all wrong. I was wrong. Because I'm pretty sure in my top 10 cards of Fates Collide, I didn't put Audino in there. So let's have a look at regular Audino. Drain Slap, 20 damage, heal 20 for a colourless. Do the Wave, 60 plus 10 for each of your bench Pokemon for free colourless energy. 110 if you've got a full bench for free energy. That is not a good attack. It's not good at all. So let's have a look at Mega Audino. Now, it's got 220 HP, that's pretty gosh darn high. We'll talk about why that's important in a moment. It's got a weakness to fighting, and a weakness to fighting is good. If Worlds this weekend had been full of decks like VILEPLUME Zygarde, Audino would have been a terrible choice. But from what I can see this weekend, and from the people I've spoken to, fighting decks were all but absent from the World Championships this past weekend, meaning it might as well have had no weakness. But it's the attack that actually makes it good. Free energy, 110. Now, we just said free energy 110 is not spectacular. But if you played a supporter card that turn, you get to do 50 to a benched Pokemon. Now, this is not necessarily a good attack. And the argument of this video is not, oh my god, Audino is the best deck ever. The argument of this video is, oh my god, it was such a good play for Worlds, if only we'd have all thought about it. So 110 damage will 2-hit KO almost everything. There's a few Pokemon like Primal Groudon and Wailord that won't be 2-hit KO, but it'll 2-hit KO most stuff. And it will 1-hit KO Shaymin EX, which means you're getting 2 prizes and sniping 50 for free energy. That is not terribly bad at all. And it's free colourless energy, which means you can use double colourless, and it's a Mega Pokemon, so you can use Mega Turbo, which means you can just go double colourless Mega Turbo. You can get Mega Audino going in a single turn. This is very, very nice indeed. Now, why is a 50 snipe good? It's matchups. 50 snipe is enough to KO an Oddish. 50 snipe is enough to KO a Combi. 50 snipe is enough to KO a Joltik. Now, if it was 60, it would also get Pokemon like Froakie and Pumpkaboo and would be even better. If it was 60, it would 2-hit KO a Shaymin on the bench. It's not, it doesn't get over it. But it gets enough massively played Pokemon to be good. And even if you're sniping 50, then that will, for instance, 2-hit KO a Froakie. But it will also 2-hit KO a Frogadier. It will 2-hit KO a Pumpkaboo whether or not it has a Fighting Fury belt attached to it. And this is how Mega Audino wins. You are basically just 2-hit KOing everything, or 1-hit KOing a Shaymin or non-EX, while sniping enough damage to turn the prize trade in your favour. And you get to turn the prize trade in your favour even though it's an EX. And the HP really, really helps it to stay alive here. So we're going to have a look at matchups in a minute. Let's have a first quick look at other Pokemon to play along with it. Now, I am going mostly by the deck list here of Shintaro Ito, the chap who had the success at Worlds with this particular deck. but I shockingly agree with the choices he's made here in terms of the decks to play. So, he has a Magana EX, or Magana EX, or however you want to go ahead and pronounce it. I am fine however you do so. Now, we've talked about Magana on this channel, my podcast PTCG Radio, a number of times. The attack is supremely underwhelming, although you can hit a Metal Weak Pokemon for 240, not bad at all. And because Mega Audino is a colourless Pokemon, you can play whatever energy you like. Clearly, you're going to see as we go here, Metal Energy is the energy to go. So you can use the attack to do 240, so if you were to end up against a Metal Weak deck, you could do some damage. But it's the ability Mystic Heart we like here. Prevent all effects of your opponent's attacks except damage done to each of your Pokemon that has metal energy attached to it. So something like a Froakie trying to use Bubble to paralyze you to, waste a turn cannot do so if you've got metal energy on your Audino and you've got a Magana on the bench. The other Pokemon you really want to be having a good look at in this deck is Cobalion. Now, you need a non-EX attacker. Cobalion does non-EX attacking very nicely. Now, this is another Pokemon from Steam Siege, so two good support Pokemon from Steam Siege getting very, very quick play in this deck here. And it's a second attack Revenge Blast we're really looking at. 30 damage plus 30 more for each prize card your opponent's taken. They're down to one prize remaining, you get to do 180 damage, and that's pretty tasty. Even doing 150 is enough to KO an awful lot of stuff, and that's if they've taken 4 prizes. The other Pokemon you really want to be looking at here is Shaman EX, obviously, because you can draw cards, and Hooper EX for the ability, because let's face it, you're relying almost entirely on EX Pokemon, from Shaman to Magana to Audino to Mega Audino, and Hooper just allows you to search for free EX Pokemon. The other card that was included here by Shintaro was an Absol. Now, Absol's a fun little Pokemon, and it has an awful lot of use here. You're sniping for 50 damage to the bench. Well, Absol allows you to go ahead and move 3 damage counters from one of your opponent's Pokemon to another of their Pokemon with his Cursed Eyes ability. So you can do 50, but then the next turn you can move 30 to a Pokemon, do another 50, then you are KOing something like, for instance, a Frogadier, even though it was just put on the bench and is entirely untouched to this point. Very nice indeed. The other couple cards which were played in this deck, and which I would highly recommend playing in this deck, are Mega Turbo, because you get to accelerate energy, and Parallel City, to get rid of your Shamans. I've said that this deck relies on the prize trade, so of course you have to go ahead here and make sure that your opponent isn't KOing Shamans. So what you do is you fill your bench up to 5 with Audinos and Shamans and all sorts. Then you play a Parallel City with the side that limits your bench to 3. And then you discard your Shamans, so the Shamans aren't on the bench. You don't lose the prize trade. Excellent, very sensible inclusion in this deck. So, why did it win? Well, there's a few reasons. Firstly, the prize trade. Even though it's an EX Pokemon, it can win the prize trade through sniping. Secondly, it can KO Pokemon I've said before, like Oddish, like Combee, like Joltik. If we were playing in a format that didn't have a whole bunch of 50 HP or fewer Pokemon that people played, then it would not be so good. But we do, so it is. High HP, this is not to be underestimated. I'm going to give you a couple of examples in a minute, but for the time being, high HP saves him. But really, it's the matchups. And I think the best thing to do here is just to go through the other decks that made top 8 at Worlds. And hopefully that will show you why it had such a good run. Now, I'm not saying these are the only decks that were played at Worlds. But generally, if you look at the top 8 of a tournament, it is fairly indicative of what was doing well, the kind of decks that were winning. So there were 2 top cuts for Night March. A Night March, there are 2 reasons it beats Night March. First of all, 220 HP is very difficult for Night March to hit. Night March does 20 damage for every Night March Pokemon in their discard pile, but they're playing 4 Joltik, 4 Pumpkaboo, 4 Lampent, which means they are playing 12 Night March Pokemon. They've got to get 11 of their 12 in the discard pile to one-hit KO you. Now, even if they have 0 Night March prized, and on average they should not have 0 Night March prized, that means that they've still got to get 1 out and the other 11 in the discard. If they've got 1 prize, they can't do it. Okay, you can play a card like Giovanni's Scheme, so you only need 10 of your 12 Night Marches in the discard. Either way, this is incredibly difficult to do, and Audino has a weakness to fighting, not to Joltik or Pumpkaboo with Lightning or Psychic. The other reason is, it just wins the prize trade so hard against Night March. You can one-hit KO their Shaman, and we all know that Night March, not every game, but often needs to use Shaman. And even if they're not using Shaman, if they ever put a Joltik down without a Fighting Fury belt, you are one-hit KOing it on the bench, which means they can only ever bench it with a Fighting Fury belt. Not only that, but 110 KOs both a Pumpkaboo or a Joltik, even if they've got a Fighting Fury belt on them. And 2-hit KOs a Pumpkaboo with or without a Fighting Fury belt, and 2-hit KOs a Joltik with a Fighting Fury belt. To put it another way, even if every Night March attacker always has a Fighting Fury belt, and you never KO a Shaman, you are getting 3 prizes in 2 turns. 110 twice, plus 50, which will 2-hit KO something on the bench. That's worst case scenario. While they are really struggling to one-hit KO. Now they're going to be a little bit faster, and regular Audino only needs 9 Night March Pokemon to one-hit KO, which is getting an awful lot more reasonable. But by the time you start getting those Megas out, ladies and gentlemen, the early game should be in Night March's favour, but oh my goodness, it swings in Audino's favour very quickly. As a fun little side note, it really doesn't take much for Cobalion to start one-hit KOing both Pumpkaboo and Joltik, so that is an option early on in the game. There were also 2 top cuts for Greninja. Now, Greninja's not quite such a straightforward matchup because the numbers aren't quite so nice. Now, 110 is enough to KO a Froakie and a Frogadier, but it is not enough to KO Greninja, and especially Greninja Break. And of course, 50 twice is enough to KO either a Froakie or a Frogadier, but you're not one-hit KOing anything on the bench with your Snipe, which is a little bit unfortunate. But you've got the speed factor here, and that's what really, really helps you. You are not going to be one-hit KOing too quickly. And with Greninja Break having 170 HP, that means a 50 damage Snipe plus 110 is not going to be enough to get a KO on a Greninja Break. But you should be faster than them. Turn 2, you should have a Mega Audino up and running. Turn 2, if they're lucky, they're going to water duplicates. Greninja Break shouldn't be coming out till turn 3 or 4, by which point you've taken a few prizes. And after all of that, you've still got 220 HP. To put it another way, 220, that is a Giant Water Shuriken on 1 break, retreating into a 2nd break to do Giant Water Shuriken for 120, then doing regular Water Shuriken on an XY Greninja to go up to 150, and then using Moonlight Slash on the Breakpoint Greninja while putting the energy back into your hand to go up to 230 damage. Now, don't get me wrong, ladies and gentlemen, that is not impossible, but that's how much it takes to get a one-hit KO. Now, by the time you've got Greninjas out and rolling, that's good, not to mention you've got Rough Seas, which can help to heal off the bench damage for Mega Audino, so it is far from impossible, but I like Mega Audino's matchup here. Now, Greninja's got a much better chance of Night March, the healing with Rough Seas is good, and it's hard to hit the numbers for Audino, but it's also hard to hit the numbers for Greninja, and Audino is going to be going faster. Not to mention the fact that Audino plays a whole bunch of counter stadiums. We also saw a top cut for VESPIQUEN. Comby's got 40 HP. which means, and Combe's, the basic to your stage 1 main attacker, which means as soon as your opponent puts down a Combe, you can KO it with bench damage, not to mention the fact that you're one-hit KOing anything they put down. And a VESPIQUEN trying to KO an Audino, 220 damage, that's 20 Pokemon in the discard pile, or 18 Pokemon in the discard pile with a muscle band. That is not easy to do, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Metal did get a top cut at Worlds, and Metal might seem like a slightly worse matchup again, but here's the thing about Metal, your main attacker is Genesect EX, who does 100 damage, plus 20 damage for each metal energy attached to Genesect that you discard. Well, here's the problem, ladies and gentlemen. 220 HP, means 12 energy discarded, or Muscle Band on Genesect, 10 energy discarded. How often do you think they're going to be able to get 10 energy on a Genesect and then discard it to KO the Audino? They're probably 2-hit KOing you, you're 2-hit KOing them. Except they need free regular energy and they've got to have Bronzong or Max Elixir, whereas you're using free energy including double colorless. This strikes me as an almost 50-50 match. Oh wait, did I forget about the 50 snipe? I did not, ladies and gentlemen. See, here's the thing. While you're 2-hit KOing them and they are 2-hit KOing you, you are sniping 50 damage to the bench. Which means every second turn, you are KOing a 90 HP Bronzong, which is pretty gosh darn vital for this deck to work. So actually, you're getting 3 prizes every 2 turns, and they're getting 2. Now, what looked like the worst matchup in top 4, although Shintaro did beat it in top 4, was Vileplume stuff, playing cards like Glaceon to shut down evolutions, and playing Edgeslash to make sure you couldn't attack with special energy, although you can play enough basic energy here to make it kind of work, while also playing Vileplume here to really shut down the fact that to really stop your setups, to slow your setup. You're still doing 110 per turn. You still just need essentially a stage 1 and 2 energy attachments. It's not the slowest deck ever. It's not the fastest, but it's not the slowest deck ever. It could easily lose to something like Vileplume Big Basics, but it can also win fairly easily as well. And if I remember correctly, the Vileplume Big Basics did not play any fighting Big Basics because it didn't think it needed to. Had it played a fighting Big Basic, maybe we'd be having a very different discussion. But he didn't. So we're not. Now, this really was why it did so well at Worlds. After Worlds, it doesn't really lose anything per se, but there's things like Mega Rayquaza, which can fairly easily one-hit KO it. There's things like Mewtwo that can use damage change while you're 2-hit KOing each other, and there are things like Sceptile where you're both 2-hit KOing, except your 50 snipe is nowhere near as good as their attaching 2 energy and healing completely. I'm not loving this deck after rotation. But as a play for Worlds 2016, oh my goodness, was it amazing. This is why it did so well at Worlds, ladies and gentlemen. It was in a format where people were not prepared to one-hit KO Mega EXs that they were not hitting for weakness. And nobody was hitting Mega Audino for weakness. Not even, there was no deck. Nobody was playing fighting. I mean, I'm sure a few people were, but very few people were playing fighting. And it was perfectly positioned to pick off the non-mega decks like Greninja, like Vileplume, like VESPIQUEN, like Night March. It was perfectly positioned to take out all of those decks in a way other decks weren't. That's why it did so well. Now, in terms of a proper deck list, I shall give you a proper deck list breakdown in the very near future. The list has been published on Pokemon.com, so I will give you a proper breakdown of the deck list in the near future. Of course, if you really want that, make sure you pop it down in the comments. Speaking of which, there's a comment section. Tell me how much you love Mega Audino. There's a like button, click it. There's a subscribe button, click it. And if you have already subscribed, get someone to subscribe on your behalf. We are rocketing to 5,000, ladies and gentlemen, unless you're listening in the future, in which case I hope we've gone well past that. So help us along, get some more subscribers. I will love you for it. And of course, as always, by far the most important thing is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.